What's up, everybody? I'm Zach Miller from Reception Perception, joined here today with Derek Klassen, does all of our QB charting, and we're going to be talking about Michigan's quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. Let's hop right into it, Derek.
Yeah, I've got a few clips here. The first one is going to be, I'm going to have a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, and then this one is kind of both. So that's how we're going to start out. So on this play, Michigan is going to be rolling out to their right. It's kind of like a rollout from gun here into the bunch. JJ is going to throw a sail corner route. It's a little late, which is the bad part. I think, we see with McCarthy there are instances where he's just a little late doing things in structure. But then where I think you see some of the bright spots with McCarthy is what we talked about in the main podcast is he has these moments of really thoughtful ball placement. And I think you see that here. So I'm going to roll the clip. He's going to start rolling out right. Ball you already start to see 14 here, the slot receiver kind of flattening out on this sail route. The ball should probably already be out by now. I think JJ was maybe worried that this corner out here was going to start to drive on it. That's what happens anyway. So if he just thrown it earlier, it wouldn't be a problem. But JJ does eventually start to realize that that's what happens. And instead of leading this receiver all the way to the sideline, which is typically what you would want to do on this route, JJ recognizes that this corner does fall off and start to attack it. And so he kind of leaves it on the receiver's inside shoulder, which to me is a really good instance of him really realizing oh, I'm late. I made a mistake. How do I fix it? And how do I fix it is a huge part of NFL quarterbacking. So I thought this was a really great play from him.
And one of the things that looking at J.J. McCarthy and his accuracy is he does have that zip. He does have that ball placement. Leading receivers isn't necessarily a strong suit I saw from him, but placing the ball to where the wide receiver can get it and the defender can't was one of the strong suits, and you kind of see that on the play here. This is from his 2022 film, which we do look a little bit of that from the year before to get a better image of the player, but we do watch a lot of his 2023 film too, and you see a little bit more confidence from that, but this is still something we see a lot in J.J. McCarthy's game. All right, moving into our second clip here, some of the things that we both liked out of J.J. McCarthy's tape was his ability to read the blitz, throw under the blitz, and then take some heat in the pocket. And that's kind of what we're reviewing here. So walk me through a little bit of this film.
Yeah, so what's going to happen on this play, if you just look at the front, Ohio State is obviously very interested in blitzing J.J. McCarthy here. And we talked about it on the main podcast that J.J. is typically pretty good about knowing when he's hot, knowing how he's going to get pressured, and knowing just how to get the ball out, and having the toughness to get the ball out when he's getting hit. So their isolated receiver up here to the top is going to run an 8-yard, 10-yard curl route. JJ is going to get pressured. He's going to get unblocked pressure, and he's going to do a really, really good job of standing pat, staying tall, not being scared of the blitz, and he's going to make the throw. Going to get kind of fortunate that it ends up going for a touchdown. But you see here, I think this is just, you have a couple of different angles for this. First, I think JJ does a really good job here of slightly drifting towards the throw that he knows he wants to make. I think that to me is high level stuff. You see this from Drake May. I praised him a lot for this. Caleb does this a little bit. And then also obviously just has the toughness and kind of the whip in his arm to get that ball out from that position. I think that's impressive. And he sticks it right on his man. I mean, so this third clip with JJ is kind of what I was talking about with the bad. I think he has some issues throwing outside the numbers. It doesn't really matter to what area of the field. It could be down the field. It could be intermediate. It could be short. I think, the reason for that is I've talked about the Baker Mayfield comparison that I made a little bit earlier, where Baker kind of needs everything in his body to get the ball out. And I think specifically when you're throwing outside the numbers and trying to lead guys into areas, trying to put a little bit more feather on the ball, get it to an exact spot, I think that can be tougher because the angles of throwing outside the numbers are just tougher. And so what's going to happen on this clip is they're just going to run a speed out from the slot. Every offense in the NFL has this in their playbook somewhere. It doesn't matter what they call it. Doesn't matter how they run it. Everyone does it. McCarthy is just going to kind of drop back. He looks fine. Everything looks clean. And he just does not put the ball where it needs to be. Because I think, again, on some of these outside throws, when he's throwing outside the numbers, it's a little bit harder for him to gauge exactly where the ball needs to be and for him to put some of that touch on it. So there's not really a whole lot to bark at him at, or pinpoint, oh, this coverage, blah, blah, blah. It's literally just, these are some of the throws that I think that he struggles with and is going to have to get better at in the NFL. When he throws outside the numbers, a lot of his best stuff are just stop routes and curl routes because you know exactly where the spot is. Whereas stuff like this, I think it's a little bit trickier for him.
Yeah, some of the holes that I saw, which are kind of really good ball placement on those high velocity throws on a rope. Once you see him needing to put a little bit of touch, a little air under the ball, we start to see that kind of fade out with JJ McCarthy in his game. Not something that he can't do, but something that he needs to improve on walking to the NFL, which you don't see a lot on the tape at Michigan. Leads to a little bit of an inconsistent deep ball as well, where you're seeing him try and fit it into tight coverage on a deep ball that's on a rope, where it needs to have that air underneath it. That's that Russell Wilson quality where he's putting a little bit of a moon ball. He doesn't have that in his game yet. That doesn't happen with JJ McCarthy. Almost everything is a frozen rope, which is great on that short to intermediate. Once you start moving down the field, need those touch passes, he kind of loses that element of his game. I think this clip here does a really good job of exemplifying that and his lack of putting a touch on the ball. So walk me through that and what you're seeing here.
Yeah, so this clip is from 2022, to be fair, but I think this is kind of an issue that still persists for JJ McCarthy in 2023, where he does just kind of struggle to put air under the ball. And I think the problem on this play is kind of twofold. So before I roll the play, from this right side, they're going to run like a crossing route kind of to the middle of the field. JJ is going to have plenty of space to step up in the pocket and make this throw. I think he hitches one time too much, and so he kind of leaves himself not as much time and space to make the throw as he's going to want to. And then I think he really struggles to put air under the ball and get it over the defender when he needs to go make the throw. So I'll start to roll the clip here. So JJ hits the top of his drop here. You can see this player, I want to say that's Colton Loveland. I'm just going to say Loveland. One of their tight end, like wide receiver, whatever. He's running back to the middle of the field. You can see him here. He kind of has leverage. He's going to be able to get open. I think JJ, you can see him hitch 2 or 3 times there. It kind of takes him a beat to get in there. He's not anticipating that this is going to be open, even though there's no middle of the field defender here. Like this should be open for all intents and purposes, because it's third and like 15, or it's third and almost 20. Like there's nobody that's going to be defending this. He should be able to just make this throw. Hitch is a bit too long, and then you can see as he makes the throw, defender kind of starts to undercut it. I think he has plenty of space here to put a little bit more air under the ball and let Loveland go get it, especially if he had been earlier. Like if he had thrown this ball earlier, he would have even more space to go and do this, but he's late. And so he tries to kind of throw this on the line the way that he usually does. It ends up a little bit behind his receiver, and Loveland is not able to make the catch. So this to me is just an instance where I think McCarthy can be a little bit late sometimes. And then as a result of that, he sometimes doesn't have the accuracy to put it over guys and go make a play.
Yeah, and like you said, walking into his 2023 film, it's not exactly the same as 2022, because I think he carries himself with a lot more confidence in the 2023 season. But this stuff doesn't go away in the film. Yes, he's making this throw maybe a touch earlier in 2023, but he still does have that hitch, that hold up, especially when it's like, I do need to put air into this throw. He's a little hesitant there, and I think it's because, one, he doesn't get a lot of practice in that in the Michigan's offense, but two, he still kind of struggles with that in his game. You see it here, doesn't drop that in the basket the way you want to, tries to put everything on that frozen rope, which is so effective in the short to intermediate levels of the field. But when you need a little bit of touch, struggles with that there, doesn't lead his receiver. That's something I think he really struggled with in his game, especially in 2022, but still in 2023, was giving his receivers opportunity for yak, not his strong suit. When we're talking about his accuracy and his ball placement, it's putting it to where the defender can't get it, but not leading his receiver and giving him opportunity. I think that's a pretty big weak spot in his game. I do want to move now. Let's talk a little bit about your charting. So one of the best things you do of reception perception for us is the quarterback charting, which is watching all of this film, turning it into really good visual data, and just kind of giving us an opportunity to see what you see in a much easier aspect. So let's start up with that. I'm going to throw up JJ McCarthy's heat map on here. This is kind of where we talk about where he's throwing the ball well, a good visualization of what we're talking about here. So walk me through this a little.
Yeah, his heat map concerns me a little bit. The 71.4% adjusted accuracy off the top is actually fine. It's basically the same as like Bryce Young last year. It's better than Anthony Richardson, better than Will Levis. It's like a hair better than Caleb Williams this year. So that part is not concerning. It's when you dig in a little bit deeper to it that it starts to be a little bit concerning. I mean, you look here in that 1 to 20 yard area, 3 spots of red, only 1 of green. That's not great. that tells me that he has more struggles than not. And this one patch of green where he has to the right side, 11 to 20 yards, I think a lot of that is one, in this offense, anytime they were like getting their like sail routes and stuff open or like running smash concepts, a lot of it was to the right side because, right-handed quarterback's more natural throwing to the right, yada, yada, yada. And they did a really good job of getting that open all the time. And he made those throws to his credit, but they were open a lot. And then also whenever McCarthy does bail out, it's typically to his right, and he's usually pretty good throwing on the run when he needs to. So I think that's where that comes in. I think, you start to look at the rest of his 1 to 20 yard area here, though, and it's a little concerning. Outside the numbers, he's typically not great. He really struggles over the middle. Some of his best throws are over the middle, but on the consistency basis is not exactly there, which I think is a little bit of an issue. The other problem I have with him is his tight area or his tight window accuracy. Not very good. It's not on the screen here, but it was a 40.3%, which is one below average for the NFL, sample that I charted last year for the 2022 NFL season. But also it's worse than every quarterback I charted last year outside of Hendon Hooker, who was like a fake player to me. So that's not a good spot to be in. So that's kind of the concerns I have with JJ McCarthy's heat map, is that the more you dig into his accuracy numbers, the worse they look.
Yeah, we talked about this on the main show a lot. They do a lot of bootleg action in Michigan's offense, which is reflected here. You see a lot of these really high success rates near the line of scrimmage, even good underneath the 10, and that right side of the field too, at that 10 to 20 range. That's a lot of his bootleg throws where he's running out to that right side. You have a wide receiver cutting across the field. It makes it very easy for him to make that throw in a range that isn't necessarily his strong suit all the time, but can be reflected on this chart as being really, really good. It's not, I think, either an area of the game that me and you think is his best, which he does have those areas, which is like putting that ball on a rope into the chest of his wide receiver. That's not always reflected on these charts, but talking through them is a really good way for us to see exactly where he's putting that. With JJ McCarthy, we have that out here of his success rate by route. So it's not the most impressive looking route tree that we've had from a quarterback, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad. So talk to me a little bit about what you see here.
Yeah, I do think that the route tree in a way kind of encapsulates what McCarthy is as a prospect, in the sense of like when you're drafting him, you're not drafting substance, where you're not drafting consistency. And I think you see that in the route chart here, where there's no one area where it's like, oh, this is clearly money for him. I mean, the only two routes he had in the green were screens, and it's not even like technically on the chart, but the other, unchartable scramble drills, he actually was in the green, so that's good. But all the other stuff, he's either average or below. What I will say is that for routes you throw a lot, even just being average is fine. Just because like the nature of like, if you're throwing them a lot, like it's more valuable to be able to do it and function at it and do it a lot than it is to like be insane at it and also throw them a lot. Like that just isn't realistic. There's just kind of a push and pull with volume and efficiency in football in general. And so you look at some of the routes that JJ did throw a lot. He threw a lot of corners, which I kind of bucket sail routes into that. And like I said, they were open in this offense all the time. And he got to average there. So for how often he threw them, I think that is actually pretty good. Same thing with post routes. He threw 9% of his routes were post routes, which I classify seam routes as posts, and he was really good at throwing those. And so for him to get to average on that for how often he threw them, I think is good. And then the same can be said for curl routes, which I think, again, when we were talking about his stuff outside the numbers, especially in the underneath area, I think those are his best throws because the spot is very clearly defined, like where the ball needs to be. And so I think, him being able to throw 15.5% of his passes on those curl routes and stuff and be able to function at them at a relatively high level, close to being above average. I think he's only like 1 or 2 percentage points below average or under the cutoff for like being in the green. So pretty sad for him there. So I think there are throws that he did well, even though there's no clear, this is where he wins type of thing.
Where would you like to see him go? What are your expectations? What do we need to get the best version of JJ McCarthy?
I want to see him somewhere that has a quarterback in place that makes him not have to play. Whether that's, I think Minnesota with Kirk Cousins, if they can bring him back for a year and then let JJ just sit completely and like have that would, I think, to me be the luxury of Kirk Cousins is like, if Kirk is the quarterback, for a fact nobody else is playing, because whatever you want to say about Kirk, the dude is going to hold the job, and there's not going to be any doubt about that. And so I think that would be good for JJ to be able to sit. I think in other spots it could be like, you go sign a Jacoby Brissett to start half the season and let JJ kind of figure some stuff out there. But I think because he's a guy who never really played in a huge drop back offense, I think it's going to be a huge learning curve for him. And then I think there is just stuff that he needs to learn. We've talked about some of his post snap processing, some of the layering of throws that he's not able to play with right now. So I think he's just going to need time to fix some stuff where he's not going to be a guy who immediately comes in and plays. That's why I'm a little bit scared of some of the spots like the Raiders, if they didn't, sign somebody else to start, or if they weren't comfortable letting O'Connell start games again or whatever. That would be a scary spot to me, because him just getting thrown to the wolves, I don't know, man. I would be very scared about that. So I would really love a spot where he can take some time to really understand how to get into the league, and truthfully add like 10 to 15 pounds if he can get there.
My pro comparison for him was Jordan Love coming out of Utah. I think they had a lot of the same shortcomings. I think if he could follow a development plan like that, maybe not as long as Jordan Love, but similar to what we saw with Rodgers, where he's sitting behind a quarterback like a Kirk Cousins for a year in a good offense to where he has time to develop, I think both of us are on the same page where we could see the ceiling of JJ McCarthy being an above average starter, where he's in that like 10 to 13 range in the NFL. And I think that's great. I think that's definitely good enough on there.
Definitely. I think Jordan Love is a great best case scenario for him. I'm probably not as optimistic that he gets there, but I think he's, I think that's a pretty good path for him to undertake.
Thanks everybody for checking out this show. If you want a more in-depth analysis, go check out our audio-only version on the podcast. You can find it anywhere you find Reception Perception podcast. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe on the channel, because we're going to be doing a lot more of these before the NFL draft. We're going to get a lot of quarterbacks out, so make sure you're here for it. See you next time.